To welcome Regina Harmon, the Executive Director of the Food Recovery Network, to discuss food insecurity and how the Food Recovery Network supports those in need. So, welcome to WMSC.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to talk with all of you.
Well, we're so excited to talk with you this morning. So we're gonna start off with tell us what the mission of the Food Recovery Network is in addressing food insecurity, particularly on college campuses.
Absolutely. So, Food Recovery Network started in 2011 by college students at the University of Maryland who saw a lot of food, perfectly good food, being wasted on their college campus. And when they were volunteering out in the world in their local community, they saw a lot of direct need for food. And they had been participating in other methods of getting food to people in need, people experiencing hunger. So they would go on peanut butter and jelly sandwich making drives. They volunteered at soup kitchens, but they kept coming back to the fact that, wow, our university is producing so much food that, at 4:58 p.m. was perfectly fine to purchase that food. But for some reason at 5:01 p.m., whatever it is, the food was, destined to go into the trash. So at Food Recovery Network, our whole mission is to recover surplus food to feed everyone who is hungry in the United States. And we do that with our higher ed student driven model that has been so successful since 2011. We have about 200 chapters all across the United States, really incredible students, student leaders who are taking their time to recover surplus food, prepared foods from their college dining halls or surrounding food businesses, and then they donate that food locally to nonprofits that are on the front lines, helping our community members experiencing hunger. And we have a chapter at Montclair State University. We're really proud of that.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have done incredible work. I mean, I've seen it
Hmm.
across like everything that you guys are doing. You are really helping the student body. And you mentioned that the network was founded by the University of Maryland in 2011. Why was higher education basically the starting point for this initiative?
Yes, it has to do with the fact that, you know, young people are at the front lines of all of these important movements all around the globe. Whenever we think about times when we have needed a change in our world, it has been young people who have literally been on the front lines to make that change. And that is why the students at the University of Maryland, were able to start this movement. They saw firsthand some pretty simple issues that hadn't really been addressed by quote unquote adults. We are overcomplicating things, but for them it was really simple. Here's a lot of surplus food. I have the time to take that food and bring it right down the street to a church. In the instance of the University of Maryland, it might be a homeless shelter, it might be a soup kitchen, but young people on the engaged in higher education, they're really in this really interesting, unique ecosystem of their time to learn about complex societal issues, but also they're available when food happens to also be available. So this is what we call the latent capacity of
Hmm.
a community. The reason why college students are so well equipped to be the drivers of food recovery is that, as I was mentioning before, a lot of times on higher ed campuses that, feed a lot of students, a lot of faculty. The food that is surplus, it's available at kind of interesting times of the day, maybe 3:30 in the afternoon, maybe 10 p.m. after a sporting event. So students are well equipped to be able to be available at those times to recover surplus food. There's about 5,400 or so higher ed institutions all across the United States. I mentioned Food Recovery Network. We have chapters in about 200. We have a lot of work to do because these particular institutions produce a lot of food, and we want to make sure that every single one of them that has a dining hall of some kind, not all of them do, but the ones that have a dining facility of some kind, that the act becomes recovering food, not throwing it away.
No, 100%. I mean, it's nice to see this huge initiative happening. I mean, right here at Montclair and all over. Can you recall a time where you've seen students, making a difference when it comes to food scraps.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I will say, with Food Recovery Network, the beautiful thing about what we're doing is we are taking the surplus food that is
Mhm.
still in the back of the house, still in the kitchen, that has never been served. So these are full entire meals, whole entire pans of rice, of,
Yeah.
chicken, of, whatever it might be. Everyone has been trained on how to handle the food safely, and we work with dignity with the dining staff who they don't want to throw this food away. They also know how to handle the food safely. So they are working in collaboratively to make sure that this fresh, safe food is safe to eat and can go to these various locations. And a lot of times they will bring the food to um, college to their own college food pantry or
Yeah.
areas on campus that will help support the student body who is experiencing hunger. So that is one example that I will say that I'm just so inspired by all of the incredible student leaders in our network. We're about 8,000 people strong all across the United States. That includes, the dining providers as well, and our funders and people who are just interested in this work. But it's mostly our students and our alums. So the fact that they are taking this food and they're saying, "Hey, we know that our fellow students are experiencing hunger. We want to make sure that this food is available to them." I've been so inspired to see, in the face of some of these disasters that are happening,
Mhm.
wildfires, the hurricanes, flooding, um, I don't know, the pandemic.
Yeah.
During
Yeah.
all of these really intense moments, our students, again, safety is always the number one thing, but they keep on keeping on. They keep on finding perfectly good food that is safe to eat, that needs to be eaten by people experiencing hunger, and they will do anything that they can. I've seen students that, hey, their volunteers maybe forgot to show up during a recovery. So the student leaders, they're the ones that are, rolling up their sleeves and doing the food recovery when maybe they thought that they weren't going to be the ones responsible for that day. We see all kinds of experiences across the network, and the students are just tenacious. They're kind. They have deep focus on doing the right thing, and I mean that's why I love what I do because literally I'm inspired every single day. I cry a lot because it's so
You can
important.
see the passion right through everything that you're saying.
Yeah, the strong passion. I mean, I witnessed it firsthand. I'm seeing how it has changed students here at Montclair. I mean, just our chapter, what they do is they take the leftover food and they make it into microwavable meals, put it into our pantry, and students are coming in and out. And it is so beautiful to see. I had an opportunity to talk to countless students who have been incredibly affected by this and your guys' work, and it's amazing to see. But I want to talk about a little bit more on the broader aspect of food insecurity. I mean, it doesn't just impact a student nutrition, but how does it also impact their mental health and even their academic success?
Oh, such a great question. I mean, let's face it, nobody should be food insecure. We
Mhm.
have way more food in the United States to feed everyone who's hungry. And so it's really um, the data is in. And if you've ever talked to anybody who maybe growing up experienced food insecurity, it never leaves you. That experience never leaves you. And so, scientifically, we know a lot of the issues that happen when young people do not have the food that they need, especially, younger children, in terms of, behavioral issues that they might experience. But when we think about, folks that are the traditional college age, and shout out to all the higher ed students that are, of all ages, of course. But if we think about the traditional, 18 to 22, 24-year-old, well, gosh, if you are hungry, it makes it really hard to study. It
Mhm.
really grinds you down because you're just the weight of the worry is on your shoulders. And so instead of really focusing in on your classes, I mean, this is an experience where all you need to be doing is learning and writing papers and taking tests and getting to know your fellow student body. But if the weight of I don't know where my next meal is coming from, that is on your shoulders. It is just in your heart and in your mind all of the time. And we did a report with the National Association of Realtors, a combination. Well, they did the report. They have the economists and the data scientists on their staff. But it showed the link between food insecurity and housing insecurity. So if by the time you go through all of your bills and you happen to be food insecure, the chances are that you're also housing insecure. Chances are you're also transportation insecure. In the instance of folks in higher education, you might be book insecure, meaning I don't know if I'm going to be able to afford to get the resources that I need, if books and other things for this semester. So it really has so many terrible implications that we can stop today if we could just organize, all of us.
Yeah. I mean, beautifully said.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. And that what comes along with being food insecure, there's also a stigma behind it. And as students, what steps do you think we can take to not only educate ourselves and others, but create a supportive environment to those who are facing food insecurity?
Thank you for that question. I am all about the dignity, the respect, and the collective. Um, Everyone deserves food. So, first and foremost. And at Food Recovery Network, we have normalized that. We don't care who you are. We're glad that you're here. We're glad you want to take a meal. That is awesome. No questions asked. And so many of the nonprofits that, when students do bring the food off campus, so many of those nonprofits, the same thing. They're not asking you, oh, are you really hungry? Do you deserve this food? No, no questions asked. Please take what you need. I know across the network, there are chapters that have started basically like study cafes so that anyone who comes to this particular spot on their campus, everyone's just hanging out, chilling, and there happens to be food available. So it has become this really wonderful space for anybody to come, hang out, get to know one another, and there's food available. We know that a lot of times, with the food pantries, they're making them just look really beautiful, very welcoming. And again, that normalization of no one's watching you, no one's saying like, oh, they took an orange or they took this or that. And that comes from within. That comes from, the folks that are supporting their student body in this way, saying, hey, this is the vibe that we want to put out there, and let's do that creatively. It's really quite beautiful.
I think that's really beautiful. And, Regina, you've worked at the Food Recovery Network for a decade. I mean, what goals do you have in mind for the future of this, and where do you see it headed towards now, after beyond 2025?
Oh, I know. It has been such an honor to work at Food Recovery Network. And I love the fact that your chapter on your campus, it started in 2017. So I started at FRN in 2015. So I love communicating with chapters that have been around for just as long as I have. It's so great. So we in 2020, right during the pandemic, um, Food Recovery Network went through a pretty important transformation based on all of the information and experiences that we had thus far. So it was to say, okay, over the first 10 years of our time at Food Recovery Network, because again, we started in 2011, we grew organically. We got chapters that um, self-identified as chapters that wanted to start a Food Recovery Network chapter. It was very organic. Students called one another up, met their friends that were going to different schools across the United States, and that's really how we grew. It was word of mouth. It was validation by the students to other students to say, this model works. It's super fun. You guys should do it too. Um, and so in 2020, we took all of that information, all of that learning, and we put forward our strategic framework that we call FRN 10X. And so, right to your question, it asks us, what do we see coming in the next 10 years? Where can Food Recovery Network put our responsibility, our capacity, our abilities to feed more people faster? So over the next decade or so, we're going to continue to try to get onto more higher education campuses. So shout out to everyone listening.
Yay.
Let 200, let's make it 2,000, let's make it
Look at
4,000,
that
you know?
expansion.
Go, let's go. And we also have started to partner, and I'm going to use this word authentically because that is so important, and I'll explain why in a second. But we've started to partner with community colleges, in fact, because we know that our four-year institutions, our student leaders are so critical in getting food into the communities in those spaces. Community colleges, where they actually might not necessarily have a dining hall, their campuses are widely used by a broader community. And so we want to establish relationships with those community colleges to do food recovery, if that happens to make sense to that community college. But we also now, through FR10X, we have other models that we have been working on that we have seen the community really appreciate and want. So we do free fresh produce distribution markets on Title I elementary schools. So some community colleges might want this fresh produce. We do large scale event recovery. So there are some community colleges that have really beautiful campuses where these big events take place. Big events means a lot of people, mean oftentimes a
Yeah.
larger margin of error for food to be in surplus. And so we'll work with them to support recovery from those events that they have. So community colleges is so critical to us. The fresh produce markets are so critical to us. We've done this incredible mapping project that helps us to focus in all across the United States. If we continue to do any kind of food recovery, we will be able to feed more people faster because of the data. And I can get into that, if you want. But because of this data, when we are in these very specific locations across the United States, we can feed more people faster. So we're going to continue to do that as well.
That is beautiful. Regina, you, your team, everyone at the Food Recovery Network, you're doing such amazing work. But if any students are interested in learning more about the Food Recovery Network or if they want to get involved, where can they find information and stay up to date with its activities?
Oh, I hope the students listening want to get involved. We need you. We want you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You're totally invited. So you can go to our website, which is foodrecoverynetwork.org. And we actually have a list of all of the chapters that I've mentioned, all 200 chapters. So you can see if your school has a chapter. And if not, there's a way for you to set up an application to start a chapter. If your school has a chapter, we're more than happy to introduce you to the students that are involved so you can get involved in that way. And I have to give a shout out to our first of all, to the incredible national office. Love working with everyone at the national office. In particular, though, to your question, our incredible communications team, they are great with the social media. So follow us on social media. We are on Instagram. And if you want to just get a dose of inspiration, our Instagram is where it's at. And then also a lot of our chapters have their own Instagram. So it's just incredible if people want to follow along that way too.
Well, thank you. And, you really gave us such good insight on what the Food Recovery Network is, how to get involved, and, the real impact that it has on our community and just all over the United States. But, Regina, thanks for joining us here in the Morning Buzz, and we hope that you have a great rest of your morning.
It's been my honor. Thank you all so much for what you do. Thank you.
Thank you.